started a new council, if you have a SILCA qualified or other type of qualification, clerks don't necessarily need SILCA, you can declare the general power of competence at your annual meeting, which obviously you're not able to do. The reason that the internal auditor has referred to section 137 is because, as David has said, there are still loads of other powers in law that councils can use, and it's one of the clerk's worst nightmares that when the council makes a decision, it's like, oh my god, which power are they going to be using, and you have to go through the absolute gamut of legislation to find the power, and it's one of the most common questions that clerks ask each other. The section 137 is basically a catch-all power that existed before general power of competence came into play. What that enables you to do is to do certain things that aren't covered under any of the other legislation, but it is restricted, and you are also restricted in the amount that you can spend, because there is a certain amount each year declared by government per capita of your taxable population, and you can spend up to that amount on certain things. But there are still other things that you can't do. So, to give you an example, Sean, the things you can't do, you couldn't run a community bus service, you couldn't run a community pub. Those types of things you can only do under general power of competence, because it was brought in with the Localism Act, which was the whole idea of getting assets divested down to the community. So, although you are still covered for things like dog bins, open spaces, this, that and the other, under various other bits of legislation, you've even got permitted development rights for some things as well, that you can just without planning permission, which is a great one to know about. There are certain things you can't do until you get a SILCA qualified clerk or other qualification accounts, and at that, immediately at your next meeting, you don't have to wait for 4 years, you can declare general power of competence then, and then you can resume. One other thing to remember is that anything that you have already started, you are allowed to complete if it was started under general power of competence. So anything existing is not jeopardised.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Right, we will resume standing orders, if that's okay with everyone. And that's very educational for everybody. Bear that in mind then. Are we happy to note the internal audit report, item 33? Yes? Thank you, everyone. And we don't need a vote for that, do we? Excellent. Right, item 34. We have to adopt, we're being asked to adopt the statement of accounts for the year.
Maybe a slight mistake on the agenda, so you just ignore that one and put it on to go to item 35, which is the annual governance.
Fair enough, I will do that from forward. Okay.
So it should be your the attachment with that item 34 to 36.
This is item 35, completion of section 1 of the annual return for the year ending 31st March 2022. Complete section 1.
So section 1 is the annual government statement. Now different councils do different things. I have known somebody make them all read out 1 to 9 because they all are relevant to you. But it's entirely up to you as to how you go through this. I can ask you a question, say yea or nay, and then you tick the box.
How would you recommend it received then?
Well, I can ask you, I can read out the bits and you say yes or no. It's slightly difficult because
I thought you would have the ability to answer.
No, it has to be done by resolution, but it's not, so I suppose resolution is the right way. So the first one is we put in place arrangements for effective financial management during the year, preparation of the accounting statements. To either answer yes or no. Obviously your internal audit would suggest that you have, I found that you've still got that system in place, and it's reconciled each month, so as long as council is happy, you could answer yes to that.
Are we happy?
Yes.
Double check.
Where would we stand on that on the report where it said that due to staff shortages that it's not as robust as it had previously been?
Well, you don't stand anywhere. You either
Yeah,
have,
so would we say
have it
yes
in
or no?
place or you don't.
Well, are they effective if they're not being robustly managed?
Well, they are being robustly managed.
We're
In
not
fact,
holding
the fact
them
that you
for-
said you haven't got enough staff means that you haven't got enough staff to dot the I's across the T's. What we have in place is Joe inputting the invoices being paid as required. I make sure that they're authorised. And then at the end of the month, because you don't have staffing in place, we have an external contractor who goes through and basically does an end of year reconciliation and health check and makes sure that there are no gaps.
But it does, sorry, it does say, it is clear that the loss of both the clerk and deputy clerk in early 23 has caused considerable disruption to the established control systems.
So disruption, as I would interpret it, would mean that it doesn't mean that it's failed.
No, but it's not as effective.
Well, then answer no to it.
No,
I mean,
that's what I'm
all I
saying.
want
I
to
was
do
saying
is
that.
just move on. I don't care how you
With all due
answer
respect,
this.
some of your answers are much longer than a debate over whether it's yes or no on the important document.
No, it's I can't answer the question. I think you've got effective internal controls. The internal auditor has said that unless you address it, those internal controls that were in place up until February last year are in dire in jeopardy of not being controlled in 23-24.
That's not a statement says in black and white. That's an interpretation of wording which I'm going to go on the fact that
You're interpreting it, I'm interpreting it.
I would say then is, because obviously we have to get through this agenda item, are we just going to say, does anyone want to say no? Is that the best way to ask them?
I'll just bring up the
There's no
wording here.
specific
I'm hoping I'm in the right place, aren't I, Joe? We
Okay.
confirm to the best of our knowledge and belief that in respect to the accounting statements, the statements obviously something at the end of the year, there's ongoing kind of checks and practices put in place that adhere to those things, so it's achievable at the end of the year to do what is correct. Accounting and auditing, is that the right sort of brief interpretation of it? For last year, and then 2 months of that was done, but the audit sort of says that there was disruption because of the lack of staffing, which is something we can address. And yes, it's going to be difficult for them when they take over to address the disruption with the ongoing lack of
We're not
staff.
doing it for the next year, we're doing it for 22-23.
Yeah, you had adequate internal controls up until
Okay, I
March
think this is arduous.
2023. No, I will argue it because what you're saying is the previous people that didn't leave until the end of January, beginning of February, didn't maintain adequate controls. All we've done is inherited the situation, and we have managed to continue to deliver robust, in my opinion, internal audit controls on all of the from 1 to 9. That is my opinion. If you as council don't agree with that, then you sign that and say no. We haven't done any of this.
To move forward then, because we do have to, as I said, the only way I can really see that we're going to make progress on this is if anyone feels we have to put a no in one of the columns, as you maybe speak out. I think we would agree that we have, and Paul intimated to us that we have done enough to tick yes in those columns.
Yeah,
So if anyone feels that we have to say no to one of them, perhaps they should suggest it, otherwise I would suggest we
So
yes.
just to clarify, everybody knows what a clerk or RFO has to do at the end of the financial year for a town or parish council. If you all know fully how to do it, that's absolutely fine. I'm talking to the converted. But essentially, what happens is the PKF Littlejohn will request as an external audit. They will request a number of forms of information, and they will carry out an external audit. And one of those bits of information which they are provided is the internal audit report.
Okay, thanks.
So all the comments that are contained in the internal audit report will be reviewed by PKF Literature. If any of the members around this table don't feel that's that's adequate or that we've answered this incorrectly, they can write to PKF Literature and say we don't believe that council was as robust as it should be.
So, okay, so what I'm going to say is kind of what I said before, but if anybody feels that we have to put a no in one of these columns, speak now, otherwise we're going to...
But I don't think it's a case, I mean,
We have to fill in this box.
first of all, we don't have enough information to scrutinise the questions.
Well, then we should have added the information for the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, we've got an internal auditor, we've got an auditor's report.
No, but there was no email to me saying we needed more information to take yes or no in these boxes.
Well,
So that was the time to do it, because we don't have time now. The problem is to go through this because we haven't asked questions in advance.
but that's what the internal audit has done, has gone through these questions.
So what would you suggest we do then? I mean,
Well, I assume,
are you suggesting we should put no
Well,
or
we-
yes? Because what we could do is you could say why we should put no or yes, and we could go to the vote if you think that's the most pragmatic way to move forward. Otherwise, I feel that we might be stuck in this item for longer than is necessary.
well,
Can I make a proposal to bring this to order?
Yes.
That we vote on block to either say yes or, you know, is there a format voting we can go to so that we can, to the best of our knowledge and belief, based on the previous staff that were here and everything that's happened within the audit, and looking forward to be able to say there's going to be disruption and let's address that in terms of the staffing that's available to alleviate the disruption.
Yes. I was going to say to them, if somebody wanted to propose that we put yes in those boxes,
I would propose.
we would something like to second that. Okay, I'm going to vote in
Yes,
favour.
you can. I'm
Not
afraid
on
you
block,
can
you
because
have to
they've
do,
had
no,
this.
you have to
They
take
have
each
had
statement
this.
individually.
They
We're
have
still
had
understanding
this
order, so we can't have this.
since last week, so they can go through it. They've gone through it, and
I think the point is, can we
Hang on a
vote it
second.
on block?
Hang on a
or
second, Rose.
individually?
We can, and we've had a proposal in a second. Now, who's in favour of putting yes in those boxes? I certainly am. Abstaining. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favour.
I'm obviously, I'm
Abstaining. And how many
I'm
against?
confused.
Yeah,
Against, 1 against, 5 in favour, 1 against. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. So moving on to.
can we do named?
Hang on a second.
On that side?
no, because you have to ask for that before you notice.
But it is on film. Right. Item 36 is to complete section 2 of the proposed AGAR. Would anyone like to comment before we complete this?
No.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a proposal?
Yeah, I would vote yes.
I would like to second that. Who's in favour? Thank you. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anybody against? No, so that's 6. That's carried. Thank you very much. Right. To over time. 10 minutes past. Right. So we have accounts for payment, item 37. Members are to review the schedule of accounts for payment and authorize these payments for May 2023. Would anyone like to say anything for or against carrying this motion? No? And in that case, can I have a proposer? Alan, thank you. Can I have a seconder? It's Linda. All in favour? Thank you very much. That's item 38. What we're going to do is to make sure everyone's paying attention, we're going to have to repeat what Nicola said. Right, okay, item 38, let's not do it since we have. Item 39 was to see the attached report of a new bench. Now, would anybody like to speak in favour of that proposal?
I just think it's a good idea, and I think it is needed definitely at some point.
Thank you.
I'd second that
Yeah.
completely.
That's
I've
good.
all done
You're in
a
favour?
lot.
And
I'd like to put
second
forward.
week one, thank you.
Sorry. And I think I've actually spoken to the people that were actually listed on this, that do walk around there, and they said the same thing to those lines, and I walked it myself, being a young man, 45 years old. And I do take that point. I think it'd be a really lovely thing.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. Did anyone else speak in favour?
Can I say, so I am in favour.
Yeah.
However, I would just like some clarity on what budget line this is going to come from.
Well, that's not that possibly. I think that's.
I can't agree with something if you don't know how to pay for it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. That's
I would also
that's fine. I was going to say before we get carried away. That's I don't know if that's a good question. I think the point is because it's not budgeted for, it would be reserves. I understand because it's not in our budget for the bench. I'm sure Paul agree unless we have an earmarked reserve for benches. But that's as far as I understand it.
I thought it was going to be approved of, but postponed until
Well,
some extra funding came
I
through,
was gonna
because
say, I
there was
don't
no money for it right now.
I
But
don't
in
wanna speak
principle, it's a good
for-
idea.
I don't speak for Tim. I was just going to say there is a phase 2 of the park that we're in the future. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, in light of how much we kind of know about what we've got to spend money on and what we plan to spend money where and how, based on what we've inherited from the previous council, it's an amazing idea, and I don't think anyone would disagree with the function and the option to have that there. But I think we need to speak in favour of it, but to defer kind of decision up to a point, along with other proposals that might come forward from the public, and all in like all the other things that we need to spend money on. Because although it might not be kind of much at £1,000, it's still £1,000, and we're not quite up to speed and grips with those things. And obviously, is it the Finance and Ops Committee would necessarily look into that and the appropriateness of that standing alongside any other attendant improvements? They might even already have that as a plan. So we would need to say that we would, but it's to approve and propose that it's done at some point. But
and this area to just fall within the Summer Valley rediscovered area is one of the sites that's being absolutely added to, changed and modified. So the work hasn't finished there. So to commit to putting a bench in where there's still ongoing work.
There's a number of funding options, including things like the 106 money that's going to come from the development of White Coast. Now, I think that's earmarked something like £500,000 for development of green space and stuff. So there are, but I don't think we've got funding available today.
No.
And that's the problem we've got. I don't think there's any argument that we need to do it. It's just the timescales of identifying the funding. And I think Jen's absolutely right. We've got, with all these things, we bring them forward. We've got to have.
Absolutely.
We need to bring forward fully funded ideas. Things like this.
Sorry, can we just be clear? Martin said there is another phase to this park.
Yes.
Anyway, so
It's
that
in the kind
can
of
all
pipeline,
be
as Sean
included.
alluded to, and possibly a lot of S106 funding. We're going to move on. Do we actually have to resolve anything here, Paul?
No, you can defer it to finance.
Can we make a minuted comment, perhaps?
Yeah, but we're
Is that
in
something
favour.
that would be
I mean,
reasonable?
to be honest, I mean, I think if we defer it to the finance, I know we need to discuss when Finance Ops is going to start working, start meeting, but obviously what this meeting is showing us is the sooner the better, because so many issues that are coming up tonight need to be referred to Finance and Ops. So I think the sooner we can get that running, the sooner we'll be in a position to look at things like this and look for some reserves or funds that we might be able to free up funds from somewhere else to make this.
I was going to say, well, if we don't need to, I was asking if we need to have a proposal to put that in the minutes, then that it's going to be considered at a future date, which I think was the consensus, basically, isn't it? Well, that's totally right. Whether it's considered by Finance and Ops or whether it's phase 2, I think we're all kind of in favour of considering it at a future date. We like the idea of bench.
It's a case of
Love bench.
when, not if.
does anyone want to put forward a suggestion on time?
So we don't know. Well, things I don't think it's necessarily happening. Personally, I would say we don't have to limit ourselves to that.
So we can minute that we're in favour of it, or just consider it at a time it's appropriate.
Yeah. And you know, if the person writes in again can explain perhaps that there is a phase 2 online. Right, thanks. That's item 39. We're happy with that. Item 40 is to set up a High Street working group. Would anyone like to speak in favour or against that? Sean?
Yeah, I think, so the reason I brought this motion forward is, High Street has been neglected for decades, and that's not, and I know we may agree or disagree on this, but it's been neglected by both local council and Baines Council, and we are literally talking decades. There's been numerous promises of funding. I can find you articles dating back decades of promises to spend money. I mean, there's an article here, BBC, regeneration plans for Midsummer Norton. Proposal will be drawn up by Bath and North East Somerset Council to regenerate Midsummer Norton town centre and create 1,000 jobs with new shops and businesses. Well, that was 2011, that report. And what happens is we get lots of promises from Baines. We get big articles in newspapers, and they're never held to account. The money never materialises. The action never happens.
Absolutely. You know, I would say I personally can't imagine why this would ever be controversial. But would anyone be against setting up a working group?
No.
So we can have a proposal for it in Harvey's. Excellent. Second to Sean, we're all in favour. That's excellent. And then we'll have a working group where we can discuss everything we want about the High Street Card. I think it's an excellent idea. And,
The working group, I think, needs to be in the first instance, needs to be a public meeting.
Absolutely, that sounds something the working group might have to set its terms of reference, but I'm sure that can be possible. Right, so we've gone to item 41, which is another proposed working party, which is kind of, we talked a little bit earlier about outside bodies, but this working party should have representatives who will also support CAP. Does anyone want to speak in favour of it?
Can I
Yes, of course.
propose this? So this came on the back of, I think you're all aware that there's been some social media and some talk around antisocial behaviour on the High Street, how it's impacting shopkeepers and many of the public. There was an incident, not last weekend, the weekend before, that was quite disturbing and has left quite a lot of the community, specifically females, not wanting to access the local area outside of school hours. I think community is concerned. I can see why.
Okay.
I think I had a conversation with the local police because there was talk of a quite significant nasty incident that was planned to happen one weekend, and luckily, due to the amazing police presence we had in the High Street, that didn't happen. And I just think, if you read on social media, you talk to members of the public that are desperate for the council to do something to tackle antisocial behaviour, I think we have to listen.
Okay, that's in favour of it. Does anyone want to speak against the idea? Anybody? No, speak in favour? I was going to say, that sounds, I mean, we could have, if someone wants to propose that working party.
With that, we're talking about this meeting being an open meeting.
I think it needs to be open, and I also think, I know we said about reinstating the cap, but I think it could all fall under that, because I think it is about, you know, all the local businesses doing their bit, the schools and everyone, so rather than have two.
I think it's a
The
brilliant.
initial meeting would decide what the focus is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I spoke to, I know there's been some issues around Youth Connect and the contract there, and some questions raised, and Sam Plummer, who's in charge of that, is offered to talk to us about the work they do, but it wouldn't be for a little while, and with these working parties, I have some ideas for proposals, but we're short-staffed at the moment, so we need to think about with the time scale. This is quite an urgent thing, it's happening right now, but groups like Youth Connect, and you're speaking to him, he knows what's going on, they're not necessarily missing nothing. Youths that are creating certain issues, people coming from.
I'm not saying it's all
Well,
here at all.
what I would say, I don't want
to
to
get all that.
Yeah, what I don't want to interrupt you guys, I think this discussion is very productive and is exactly why you should have this working party.
Gordon, so can I just one question? So if we agree both of these, How do I don't want it to get lost and that no one organises these.
No, it'll be resolved because we're going to vote for it, and then
Who's going to take control?
well, what will happen is Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a policy set up where a working party will be formed, and it's fairly informal, so you then will probably coordinate through an officer to arrange a meeting,
Okay.
and it will go on from there.
Okay.
That's how we've done other working parties, so that's absolutely fine.
I would just comment, sorry, but I mean, I absolutely agree with everything, but I think we need to widen the remit, because a community alcohol partnership, at the moment, alcohol isn't necessarily the major issue we've got.
Yeah.
So we need to broaden this.
But, you know, again, that's exactly the sort of things that the working party can easily change its terms of reference. So, you know, it's going to take some discussion to get that right, and people should have input in it, and that's why we should.
Okay,
if you want to do that, I think we should propose this and second it, and you can get some help from the staff to set up this working party, and then work out exactly what you want to achieve.
I'm just concerned that on both that and the previous item, we've not got any time frames agreed and limited, and I'd like to see time frames on both of those to understand how quickly we can get these into the ground.
We can't necessarily, I wouldn't have thought we can necessarily have the time or the capacity to agree them now. What we can do is resolve to set up these working parties, and then the working parties will have to discuss how they're going to operate underneath our policies. Am I right? Because
We haven't even determined who's going to be on the working party yet, have we?
well, we have to resolve to have them before that. Am I right, Paul? I'm just sure we do have a policy on setting up working
I'm just
parties.
concerned that we're going to defer this then to the next meeting, where we bring it to the next meeting and say, right, we've agreed it, who wants to be on it? And then we then go to the next meeting when we agree the next, and it's...
No, because I don't think
we need action now, and I think we're all prepared as councillors to give up time to put into these working groups.
Yes, but there isn't a proposal at the moment, for instance, to say how many people are going to sit on this working group. So we can vote on that. There aren't terms of reference set for it. So
we
can
had
resolve to
that
have it.
before, didn't we?
We can resolve to start the meeting. We do have a policy in place to guide us on setting up working groups. So now we've resolved it, I think the next thing to do is refer to the policy and set up the working group.
Is there a policy for urgency?
There's a policy for yesterday.
Well, in a way, yeah, because the councils are correct. These are now issues.
Policy, well, everything's a now issue. Councils have to go through procedure, obviously, and I think the first thing to do is to resolve to have these working groups, and then you're going to have to look at a policy to find out how they've got to operate. And they are relatively, because they're only working groups, they, as I understand it, they are going to meet when they feel it's necessary and report back to council. That's what working groups do, and they can invite councillors and other people. So, in a way, they're not the sort of statutory instruments or bodies that the committees are.
Sorry, Gordon, I know you said a few times about this policy, and I think this is a new policy since the last meeting. But at the last meeting, we all decided we want to reinstate finance not. We agreed who was going to sit on it. There was no mention of going away and reading the policy. And now at this meeting, because we want to instigate to, we suddenly have to go away and read this policy.
No,
you said that a couple of times, but you didn't say that at the last meeting when we reinstated the working party.
I might be wrong about this. But
We
I
kind
think
of
if you want to,
I
I think if you want to set up these working groups, these working parties, make them official, we have to propose it second and resolve it.
Yeah.
Once that's done, you can liaise with the officer to have a policy for setting up this working party, which will be set up in the way that you find it most convenient to convene. I think that's the correct way forward, that's all I can say.
So the finance not isn't set up correctly, we have to read
We're
it.
not talking about finance and ops right at the moment, we're actually talking about the working party to work proactively with stakeholders, local schools, police, youth service and members of the public. That is the agenda item.